Morning, Sam. Okay, wait for a few more people to join in. We can start. So, welcome to our Facebook Live this morning. This morning we're going to cover some rebreathers. The first one of our set of presentations actually, and this one we're going to do on the JJ-CCR. So today will be the JJ, and then probably tomorrow, next week we'll do the SF2. We've got the Revo, the Inspiration, the Poseidon to go through as well. So each day you'll gain a little bit more knowledge about each rebreather. We can compare and contrast the two machines and the three machines as we go through, and hopefully I'll show you how to build up the machines and prepare it for use. Just a bit of a disclaimer though, it's not designed as a training class. The whole idea of this is just to show you some of the components of the rebreather, what's involved in building it up before you would need to go dive in, and to explain to you some of the features that might make you want to buy one of these particular rebreathers. So today's rebreather we're talking about is the JJ-CCR. The JJ-CCR basically is designed to be one of the toughest, most rugged rebreathers around, quite often called the 4x4 of the rebreather world. Basically, the design is keep it simple. So as we go through, I'll show you some of the parts that mean that this is designed in the most simplest way. The way that kind of translates is that there's very little to go wrong on the rebreather, and what is there is made in such a solid way that should it get accidentally damaged or knocked, then it's going to be in super good condition no matter what. So the JJ-CCR, might have heard it called different things in the past, like the Inspiration GTI and stuff like that. It is an evolution, let's say, of the Inspiration, and there's no secret in the fact that the first JJ was an Inspiration classic head inside a can that was made to make it a little bit easier to dive and a little bit easier to attach things to. So that's where the JJ came from. JJ based in Denmark, okay, really nice guy called Jan, but he's the owner of JJ-CCR, and he put the design together. The nice thing about Jan is he's a diver himself. He does a lot of Baltic wrecks, so this machine was designed for the type of diving that he wants to do. So for a lot of us, that's really more than most of us want to do anyway. So really cool stuff. The can is the part we're going to start looking at, and then we'll move through each of the individual components. But the first thing we've got is this highly robust aluminium can. The aluminium can is one piece. It's a tube. The tube has a couple of other sections attached to it. One of them is here, the base, and the base, there's a single base plate in there, and that's made from Delrin. You'll notice a lot of the parts on the JJ are made from Delrin. They're all machined in-house, so all the parts are made together, and they're all made in the same factory. So there's very few things that are bought in. That means that all the tolerances are perfect, and it means that all of the components are machined to exact tolerances. They're not kind of standard parts bought in. So the base fits in through the bottom and sits against the lip on the top. From there, we've got a couple of little blocks and some bolts that hold on the base frame. And the base frame's there to stand the unit up. Some people like to clip stages to it, but it's there to keep the unit nice and solid. This is the full size base. We also do a slightly shorter base. The slightly shorter base, if you're just not a tall person, is great. But for most people, this full size base means that you can sit on the back of a rib, sit on a boat, and it's still super comfortable. It's not resting on your shoulders. So we'll turn it back up again. On the top of the can, we've got these two screws, and these two screws holding the handle. I'll just unscrew those for you, you'll see. There's quite a few threads. Where one small piece of engineering would do, Jan likes to put two pieces of really tough engineering. So this is our handle. Our handle fits into these two tubes that you can see. And the two tubes, some people like to put weight inside them, so you can get some lead, coat it in plastic so that it doesn't oxidize with the aluminium itself, and you can put those inside these tubes. So you've got two tubes on either side of the can. They help to stabilize the back plate, and again they're there if you want to add a little bit of weight. So they're threaded to the top. This handle's super tough. the dowel ring has got multiple threads on it and it screws into the aluminium, which means it's really easy to handle the rebreather. You can pick the rebreather up, fully assembled with all of its weight in it, and move the rebreather around no problem using the handle. That's what it's there for. So we'll attach the handle in place. Then just a couple of screw threads and it'll go down. There's no O-rings in here. There's a hole in the bottom that lets the O-ring go through, that lets the water straight out. So it doesn't matter that these don't have an O-ring on. They're not part of the loop of the rebreather. So we'll do those up. Some of the other interesting features of the can, we've got mounting points. So on the back, there's these brackets. We have this one and this one is usually where we fit our main cylinder, so I dilute our oxygen. But at the back here, you've got a place where you can put accessories. You can maybe put a suit inflation bottle, a light canister, or any other things that you want to kind of carry with you while you're diving. There's one of those on either side, and they're welded solid onto the can, and then the can's anodized just to cover everything up. Some of you might notice this hole in the back of the rebreather. This is to hold the head in. It'll come a bit more apparent later when we get to the head, so you can see that that's our can. It's super tough and super durable design. The fully assembled machine weighs around 33-35 kilos, depending on any extra weight you put into it when it's fully assembled. But the nice thing about it is it's a super low volume design, which means most people, when this is assembled, don't need a lot of weight even when diving in the sea in quite thick undergarment. So it's quite a nice machine to dive with. As with all rebreathers, we're going to start building the machine following our checklist. So this is the SSI JJ-CCR checklist. We'll start at the beginning and work our way down, making sure that we cover every point as we go. To do that, I'm going to need a pen, because it's always a good idea to mark on the checklist where you got to. You don't want to ever be taken away from your checklist if you can help it, but should you lose position, you don't want to think, okay, I've done that step and move on. That kind of cause a little bit of a problem. So we'll start right at the beginning. First thing I'm going to do is put the diver's name, the unit serial number. The unit serial number in this case can be found on the base of the can, on our CE plate here. And today's date. Okay, the first step on our checklist is to analyse, pressure check and assemble our bailout. So we need to make sure that my bailout's fully assembled, which it is here. So pressure check it first, make sure I've got plenty of gas in there. So I've got 220 bars in there. I'll make sure that I analyse that. Okay, so we'll just analyse. Okay, super. So that's 32%, so it's exactly what we need. We can then pop on our regulator again. Okay. Once our regulator's on, everything's in place, so we can make sure that our bailout is on. Good. And then back to one side. So now I put the first tick on my check sheet. My bailout is analysed, pressure checked and labelled. The next step, number 2, is to fill the scrubber cartridge with Softalign. So this is our scrubber cartridge. Scrubber cartridge is made of 2 parts. The white section here, this is what holds the softener lime. So the softener lime is going to be held in this section here. Around about 2.5 kilos softener lime sitting in there. And the black part at the top, that's our mixing chamber. The mixing chamber is the part where the electronics fits, oxygen's added, and when you breathe, all of the gas is mixed, then analysed before it comes back to the diver. So the mixing chamber sits on the top. The mixing chamber, I don't know if you can see it exactly, is threaded, and that's where our head will fit onto. So we're going to check our scrubber and just inspect it before we fill it. So, make sure that the thread is in good condition at the top there, and there's no damage. I'll take off the base screw. Nice important part with the base screw, just to make sure that you put it directly in your pocket or put it in your mouth, but don't put it on the side. The first time you do that on the boat will list, it'll disappear straight out on the scuppers and into the sea. But you can actually, if you want to, just use a M10 nut on here if you're really desperate, but we've got our proper Delrin nut, so we keep it in a safe place in our pocket. Right, so this is a base plate. The base plate has got springs on it, and the idea of this is it keeps the compression in the softener line. So when travelling, the softener line might vibrate and move a little bit, so to keep the pressure in, this spring will keep everything nice and compact and tight. There's 3 springs, and again, we just make sure it's all in good condition, nothing broken, nice and clean. In our scrubber, we've got a top scrim, and inside there we have a bottom scrim as well. These scrims are designed to stop dust and to prevent the small particles of softener line falling through the larger holes. Okay. We check, make sure our scrubber's nice and clean, ready to add the lime. Inside, you'll see there's a central pin. That central pin runs all the way up and allows us to compress and keep the softener line together. I'm not actually going to fill this today. If you want to learn how to actually fill the canister, you need to do the course. Okay, so we won't go through the actual filling process today. We'll just show you that this is where the softener lime is held. It's held in this duration. The softener lime basically removes the CO2 from the rebreather. So we need to make sure that it's packed correctly. If it's not packed correctly, it won't remove CO2 correctly, and there's a potential that CO2 can break through, causing quite a serious issue for the rebreather diver. So again, you'll learn that during your training. We're going to put our scrim inside just so we don't lose it. We will then fill our cartridge with softener lime at the top, make sure that it's full, make sure that it's compacted well, and then we'll add our top plate and of course our scrim. Nuts, making sure we haven't lost it, and put the nut on the top. Okay, good. So now we're going to pretend that this is full, ready to go diving with. To one side. And I can make a tick on my sheet. The next step is to pressure check and analyse our cylinders that we're going to add to the rebreather. The rebreather has 2 cylinders, one of diluent and 1 cylinder of oxygen. Green valve and a black valve. Black valve is our diluent and the green valve is our oxygen. On these rebreathers, when you buy them as a CE certification, the oxygen will come with an M26 thread, whereas the diluent will come with a DIN G58 thread. So the 2 threads are different, and this means you can't get it wrong. Accidentally getting the gas on the wrong side means that the calibration will be out, and the machine either won't start or might cause oxygen problems while underwater. So we've got our 2 cylinders, and we're going to analyse them first. Okay, so we have an air diluent in that one, and then we're going to mark it up. %. We'll pressure check it. It doesn't make sense to fit your cylinder all the way onto the rebreather and then turn it on and realise there's no gas in it, so we'll just pressure check it. Okay, good. 180 bars there. And you'll notice that I'm recording my mix and my pressure on my check sheet. The reason is, should there be any problems later, I've got a record of what happened. Next step, oxygen. Wait a little bit longer as the calibration comes all, as the analysis comes all the way up to 100%. And there we go, 100% oxygen. Again, I'm going to mark that straight away on the machine, and then write it on our list. Pressure check it. Ready with pressure tester. check it. And 210 bars of oxygen in there. Just release that nice and slowly. Always remember when opening oxygen valves and when bleeding oxygen off to do it as slowly as you possibly can. There are some new valves coming out really soon that allow you to open it over the space of 2 minutes. Currently most oxygen valves don't allow that, but as slow as you possibly can is a really good idea. I'm going to pop those to the side, and I'm going to write down there 210 bar in that one, and I can tick off number 3 on my check sheet. Okay, number 4 on my check sheet is to install both the oxygen and the diluent cylinders onto the unit in the correct position. So I'm going to turn it around so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to fit my diluent first. My diluent is going to fit onto my left hand side, keeping in the analogy of lean left, rich right. So the lean gas, which is my oxygen 21%, is going to stay on my left hand side, and that's as I'm wearing the unit, so that's over this side the diluent's going to fit. So I'm going to slide it into the cam band. When I'm happy with its height, its position, I want to lock it into place. There's a few interesting things to think about. I've got a different height I can choose. The higher up I put my cylinder, the further up I move the weight, and that'll help adjust my trim slightly forward in the water. If I find that I'm slightly head heavy, I can move my cylinders down slightly, and that'll put a little bit more of the weight further down, and that'll allow me to then get a little bit of weight over the back part of my body and keep my feet down. So depending on where I put that. I've then got an orientation of the valve, how far I want it turned out and how far I want it turned in. Ideally, I want it out as far as possible to 90 degrees so that I can reach the valve should I want to turn it off. But I've got to make sure that it stays within profile of the machine and the frame. If I don't, that exposes the valve to being knocked. So I'm just going to put a little twist on this valve and turn it slightly in. Once I'm happy with that position, lock it into place like that. On the right side, I'm going to fit the oxygen. It's a very similar process. Make sure I've got my oxygen cylinder. Again, slide it into the cam band. Look for orientation and height. When I'm happy with the orientation and the height, I'll just pop that into place. Okay. So, this machine here now is not got its wing backplate and harness on, so we're going to just put those into place. So the next step is to fit our wing, backplate, harness and counterlung set. To do that, I need to lay the unit down slightly, so I'm going to lay the unit on its back. And that'll give me a nice position to be able to access. I've got here 2 attachment points. These 2 attachment points are where I'm going to attach everything to. They're a standard 11-inch, same as a twin set, so the same bolt hole positioning, so I can put any kind of backplate on that I want. To do that, I use these 2 clips, and they clip into place like so. One at the top and one at the bottom. I'll just take off the nuts. Okay, and it gives me my bolt spacing. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look and just show you guys through the regulators. The regulators for the JJ are Apex US4 regulators. So they're a very, very small regulator in terms of design, and they're a very, very simple regulator. The regulator on a rebreather doesn't need to do an awful lot. The oxygen regulator puts between 1.5 or 2 litres of oxygen per minute as your body uses it, and the diluent regulator only really works during the descent to increase the loop volume, and at the bottom phase kind of just to add some gas to the wing. So they're both not being breathed from directly. There's no BOV on this regulator, so they don't need to have really high flow rates. They can have super low flow rates. To do that, they're nice and simple. They're not environmentally sealed, which means the IP doesn't creep up as we go deeper. It just kind of keeps everything nice and simple. And the adjustment screw is right on the end here. Both regulators, both the oxygen and the diluent regulator, both have overpressurization valves on them. And that's because should my solenoid be off, or should my ADV be off, there's no way for gas to vent from the hoses during ascent. So to stop the hoses overpressurizing, we have overpressure valves on both first stages. Okay. Both first stages are DIN, both first stages kind of fit into the rebreather. If we look down the oxygen side first, the oxygen regulator has 3 hoses. The first oxygen hose here has got a standard regulator fitting on it. This one goes to our solenoid on top of the head to allow oxygen to be added for metabolism. We've got our BCD fitting, which is our normal low pressure inflator fitting, and that fits onto our MAV or manual addition valve. This is so you can manually add oxygen during the dive. Should you want to bring the oxygen above what the rebreather is maintaining, or should the rebreather fail to maintain oxygen automatically, you can manually do it using the oxygen manual addition valve. Of course, we've got a SPG or manometer, and that allows us to check that we've still got gas and the gas quantity that we've got remaining. On our diluent side, we have exactly the same first stage. Okay, this one has got 2 hoses and a splitter that runs off to 3 hoses. So of course this one here is our SPG, so we can tell how much diluent we've got, and this one goes to a 3-way splitter. This 3-way splitter has 3 attachment points. We have our first attachment point, which is the short one, and this is a regulator fitting, and this goes to our ADV. ADV stands for automatic diluent valve. Okay, automatic diluent valve is designed when you descend, the loop volume is going to decrease because of the ambient pressure increase. As the loop volume decreases, it's like breathing from a bag that's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. You're going to get to the point at which you're going to no longer be able to inhale. To stop that happening, we've got a device on the rebreather that's on the left-hand shoulder T-piece that when you inhale, it pulls a diaphragm just like a scuba regulator, and that will allow diluent into the rebreather. So that's our ADV fitting. Here we have a slightly longer one. This is a long one, and this one is going to go to our MAV, so our MAV, manual diluent addition this time. This is in case during the bottom part of the dive that your ADV stopped working, you can add diluent manually. Sorry, during the descent, not the bottom part of the dive. Also, the bottom part of the dive, should you need to add diluent to the rebreather for a diluent flush, you can do it using this button as well. We've got a slightly shorter BCD inflator, and that actually this time is our BCD inflator, so it's connected directly to the wing, and that allows us to add air to the wing to offset our negative buoyancy. So we've got 2 regulators. Our 2 regulators, on this one, I've got them just bolt snapped together, 2 SPGs, just because they both go to my right hip. Best way to fit them is to lie them on top of the rebreather and then start to figure out where everything goes. And take the diluent side and pass it up through the centre of the frame, like so. And then I'll take my oxygen side, I take my 2 hoses and pass those up through the centre of the frame. In this position here, I can start to now attach the first stages to the cylinders and make sure everything's in the right place. Oxygen side, and that's the diluent side. In place. Send up the oxygen, the right hand side of the unit, and the diluent is going to go up the left hand side of the unit. Those of you that already got a JJ, you'll notice that my SPGs don't go in the standard position. I've moved them onto the left hip. Normally on the JJ, the 2 SPGs are connected to the wing behind the body, so you'll reach back, pull those 2 SPGs out and bring them in to take a look at them. Because I do a lot of training, it means I do a lot of boom drills, it means I need to look at my SPGs a lot. It means I'm a little bit easier for me to find, clipping them on the hip. I just pull them out, take a look, both sides, and clip it away. While I'm doing lots of training, it means getting them in and out all the time. Standard as a normal rebreather diver on daily diving, it won't be very often that you'll look at your SPGs. If your gas is full, you're not hearing any bubbles or leaking, you've got an awful lot of time, so you've got a lot of gas in there, so it's not so often that you take a look at your SPGs. So it's only from time to time, or should you hear any leaking that you want to get them out, in which case you just pull them out, you can pop it back quite easily and leave it there. But when you're constantly training, for me it makes a little bit more sense just to put it on my hip. Make sure my solenoid feed goes into the right place and everything is sitting nice and flat. When I'm ready, the next step is to install the wing. The wing's a very basic wing. It's a donut wing, so the air can move all the way around. Like all wings, it's got a dump valve in the bottom left-hand corner and a inflator, the top left-hand corner. Slight difference about a rebreather wing to other wings, they generally have holes in them. The reason they have holes in them is because we have hoses that pass from the front to the back of the machine. So having a wing with a few holes in means that you can pass the hoses directly through. We've got our mounting points that show our positioning, so they fit directly with our 11-inch mounting holes. So I'm going to pop those into place. Oh, sorry. One more important thing I'll tell you about this wing, the JJ wing in particular, it's got our mounting points for our SPGs that we would normally use. I don't know if you can see those. So they're the mounting points we'd normally use for our SPGs. And it's got this important little bungee here. This bungee here is designed to hold our overpressurization valve for the count along during diving. So should we need to find it in a fast way, it's really easy because it'll be attached to that part of the wing and falling onto our hip. So I'm going to lie the wing down and I'm going to sort my hoses out. With the double SPG, I put them through the top hole. 1 and 2. Coming through that same hole, I have all 3 of my dynamic hoses. Just that one there. That. Then I'm going to put up my oxygen mouth hose. That's going to come through like so. Just make sure that everything's nice and neat and in place. Everything's in place. Make sure that there's nothing going to get caught when I put the back plate on. Okay, so that's all down. The next step is to fit the counterlung set. This is our counterlung set. We have an inhale and an exhale counterlung. Your exhale counterlung is going to be this side here with the overpressurization valve on it, and the inhale side is going to be this side here with the ADV built on it. So we have a left inhale and an exhale. The counterlungs are internal. They're a ultrasonically welded bag inside this plastic outer, inside this material outer to stop me getting punctured. They're quite durable and really, really tough. On the top, we've got 2 Delrin. This one is more of a water trap, so it's designed that any spit or moisture coming through the hose is going to come through, hit the water trap and fall into the counterlung if we push that through the OPV. On the inhale side, same thing. This is a T-piece. More importantly, this one kind of goes straight through, doesn't have the water trap in, because this is on our inhale side. Clean fresh gas from the scrubber with oxygen in it will be coming through to us. Here we have our ADV, and this is the ADV diaphragm, and that just allows the gas to then flow to the diver. You've got here our 2 manual addition valves. Manual addition valve on our left hand side and manual addition valve on our right hand side. Again, they follow the same pattern as before, our right hand side being our oxygen and our left hand side being our lead diluent. So we're going to put a counterlung in place. The counterlungs have 2 positions, a high and a low. The position is quite important actually, depending on how the machine sits on your back. You want, when the counterlungs are sat in place like this, that the T-pieces are just slightly back. They don't want to be so far down your back here that they're out the back of the machine and getting caught between you and the machine. If they're too far forward, there'll be too much loop at the front and the machine won't breathe as well. So it's important for the worker breathing that the T-pieces just sit slightly towards the back of the shoulders, just behind the ears like that. Which means for me, it goes on the bottom hole, so the counterlung is as high as possible. Pop that into place. hoses aren't trapped. Then a back plate. So this is a standard JJ back plate. It's a steel back plate with a harness on. There's been a few different designs of the harness over the years. This is the adjustable harness. I quite like the adjustable harness. It means when I change undersuit that I don't need to worry about having to reconfigure my harness to make sure that my rebreather fits correctly. Like we spoke about earlier, it's really important that your rebreather is in the right place. It affects the work of breathing into the rebreather, and it affects the how comfortable you're going to feel. So for me, I like to adjust it depending on the undersuit I've got rather than fiddling with a harness. There is a harness that's got a sliding mechanism on it. So I think Will's rebreather's got a sliding harness on it, but mine's got the adjustable harness on it. Nothing too particular about this harness. This is a webbing with some D-rings and some attachment points. I've got a bungee on the side to allow me to side mount my bailouts. Left hand side, I've got a suit inflator. Important thing to think about with the suit inflator is I've got the Halcyon stepped off suit inflator, so it's a little bit longer than a standard one, and that means that my suit inflation being here underneath my left arm isn't actually impeding on the counter lung. Anytime you press on the counter lung, you're going to reduce the volume of air that's allowed to enter that counter lung, and that will negatively affect the rebreather. So if you can, make sure you get a suit inflation strap that's slightly longer, stepped away from the back plate, that allows that counter lung, that suit inflation bolt just to move out slightly. Just going to pop it into place. I'm quite standard, so I use the standard central holes. Make sure everything's aligned, and then I'm going to fit my two nuts. On a standard rebreather, these are just wing nuts. For me, I've got these fancy deep sea supply nut things, Delrin nuts, but you can put on what you like. Just tighten those up. And I want these fairly tight. If these are too loose, sometimes when you're moving around with a rebreather, it can feel a little bit loose on your back and rattle around. So I'm just going to put those nice and tight on there. So what I've effectively done is I've created a sandwich. With my hoses at the back, I've placed my wing. Once I've placed the wing, I've put my counter lung set, and on top of my counter lung set, I've held it all together to the machine with the back plate, so it's all sandwiched together in place. You'll notice that the back plate doesn't actually affect the counter lung at all. The counter lungs are designed so that the two bags are stepped away from the centre so that they're not impeded by the counter lung. It's really important, especially if you want to change back plate, that you pick a back plate with the same V shape in it. If your back plate is more flat than this back plate, then it's going to impede into the counter lung, so it's not ideal. So if you can, stick with the standard plate. If you do need less weight, which some people do, it might be worth moving to an aluminium plate, but find one with the same profile so that you're not impeding your counter lung. Right. Stand the machine up and move to our next part. Our next part is just to tidy the rest of this up. So what we want to do is attach our counter lungs to our harness. The counter lungs have got Velcro on the back. The two Velcro go underneath the webbing for the harness. It's got this soft JJ pad on it. I don't put it underneath the soft JJ pad that's designed to be against your shoulder. This goes actually underneath. I find the easiest way is to put the male Velcro through, put it right into the corner of the female Velcro, and then lie them on the top. And that should fit into place, and then put this manual valve over the top. Same thing on the other side, under the Velcro. Place one through the harness. Place this one like so. And again, I can just lift it over the top. So it's starting to look a little bit more like a rebreather now. But we've got a whole bunch of hoses. We need to decide to tidy all the rest of these up. Decide what we're going to do with them. So I've got one here, and this is for my ADV. So my ADV was the regulator hose we spoke about, comes from the diluent, allows diluent to be added for the loop volume compressing as we descend, and that's attached to this part. This part here is actually an inline shut-off valve. So I have a small Delrin section that I can move up and down, and if I move it into its off position, that will stop the gas flow. In its on position, gas will flow, no problem. So I've got an on and an off. Should I, in the event that this becomes broken and I have a free flow of gas, so gas is constantly entering the rebreather, I'd want to stop that. To stop that, I'd move the gas isolator into the off position. So just check the O-ring in there, make sure it's nice and clean, greased, Then I'm going to pop that on the top. And now, got my manual addition valves. I've got one for oxygen and one for diluent, and I'm going to thread these underneath that Velcro that I've just put on. One on one side and one on the other. Take each one and connect it to the manual addition valve. So the manual addition valve on the JJ is quite nice. It's a really small kind of profile design. The button's on the end, and it's a needle valve. So the more you press, the more gas you're going to get. So it's not a needle valve actually. It's just it's a normal valve that just allows gas in. But the more you press it, the further the O-ring moves away, and so you can get more gas or less gas harder you press it. It's got a low pressure inflator fit in there, and it swivels around. That means you can swivel it around and plug in an off-board gas should you be given a cylinder from somebody else. Likely it is, it'll have a normal standard low pressure inflator fit in. You can connect it, and then you can manually add that gas. So should your onboard gases run out, off-board gas can be plugged in there. Both of these are the same. They both have the same swivel fitting, and all we're going to do is just connect those like so. One on that side and one on that side. I've got a BCD hose that I need to fit. Of course, I'm going to make sure that I route it nice and neat. I've got a piece of rubber that I'm just going to pop it through like that, connect it up. And then this, just to make sure I can find it, is going to be attached to a piece of bungee. It's just around the harness there. That will sit just on my side. SPGs, at this point I can just clip them onto the harness at the side. Right, so I managed to fit my back plate, my harness and my wing together now, and the machine starts to look a lot more like a rebreather. I can move on to our next step. So next step is we're going to look at the head and verify the battery levels are sufficient. So we'll take the head and move the rebreather to one side for a moment. This is our head. Our head, probably the most expensive part of the rebreather, probably the most complicated part of the rebreather, probably the most important part of the rebreather. This is where the magic happens. This is where the oxygen is added to the rebreather, the gas is analysed, so it's kind of the bit we want to look after. Ideally, keep your head somewhere nice and dry, storage out of the way. The rest of the machine is really, really tough and rugged, but this thing you don't want to drop it or damage it, so keep it somewhere safe. The head's divided into a couple of different sections. Undo the controller so you can see. We have the head itself, which is the Delrin part, and the Delrin part is designed, I'll bring it a bit closer to you, and the Delrin part of the head is designed to hold the electronics, so the electronics are actually inside the head. On the back you can see this kidney shape, and this kidney shape is where our batteries are stored. So in there we have two 9-volt square batteries, and we have a single AA battery. Now that can be 3.6 volt lithium, or it can be a normal 1.5 volt. So you can see the whole rebreather, we've got two threads, a big thread here, and this big, one thread, this big thread here is where the mixing chamber from our scrubber fits on. So our scrubber mixing chamber will fit together with the head. We need to think about this O-ring. This is a really important O-ring that you can see here. This O-ring is our CO2 seal. Without this O-ring in place, there's a potential that the gas that's going into the rebreather that's already got CO2 in it could bypass the scrubber and then come back into the inhale gas. That's something we don't want. So we need to make sure that this O-ring is nice and clean. We've got two O-rings here, and these O-rings, although not vitally important to the CO2 function of the rebreather, these are vitally important to the water tightness of the rebreather. So without these two in place, water can enter the rebreather. So we need to make sure again that these two are in good condition. So we've got one O-ring here and another O-ring here. We've got two hoses. We have an inhale and an exhale hose. The inhale hose, if you think about the gas path of the rebreather, you're going to exhale through this side. the gas is going to come through, and if you can see, let's see which is the best angle for you guys, the gas is going to come out. It's going to come out this gap here. Out of this gap, or all sides. It's going to come out around the outside of the scrubber, up through the base of the scrubber, and into that mixing chamber, this area here. When it's here, these 3 oxygen cells, 1, 2 and 3, are going to analyse the gas. Okay, they're going to decide how much oxygen to add. The oxygen will be added by this part here. This is our solenoid, and that hole is where the oxygen enters the rebreather. So we connect our solenoid here. The gas is now going through, and it's currently stopped by the solenoid. Once the cells analyse the gas and decide that oxygen needs to be added, it'll decide a timing for the solenoid, and the solenoid will open, allow gas to flow through and enter the mixing chamber. When you inhale, you'll draw gas up from the mixing chamber through the inhale hose. It'll come down this side and back to the diver. So we've got our exhale and our inhale hoses. Attached to the head, we have our controller. Our controller is our wrist-mounted unit, and this is how we see what the rebreather is doing, and we change how we want the rebreather to function. We press the 2 buttons on the side and it'll turn on. It's a shear water, and this one is a shear water petrol 2, so it's a dive computer basically, standalone, but it's, at this point it's got a cable connected to it that allows it to control the rebreather. That makes it a shear water petrol 2 controller. When I look, I've got an 82-day service interval, which is really bad news for me actually, 82 days, but I can see the oxygen information from the rebreather, the gases that I'm using, and the depth I'm at, that kind of stuff. So this is where we tell the rebreather what level of oxygen we want it to run. I'm just going to turn that off for now. That's our handset. It can be worn left or right wrist, it's entirely up to you. On the opposite side, we've got this one, and this is our HUD, or head-up display, HUD, and this is a series of lights. This is the shear water HUD, and it uses Smithers code to display the partial pressure of oxygen inside the rebreather using a light combination. So if I turn it on for you now, you see it go through its test phase and all of the lights that are on it. So we have reds, we have greens, we have yellows, and we have reds. So we've got a light combination. Depending on the colours of lights that flash, it'll indicate to you the amount of oxygen inside the rebreather. If we see green flashing, that'll tell us that we are 0.1 over 1. Okay, so if we see 3 green flashing lights, that will mean that we are 1.3. So our partial pressure inside our rebreather is 1.3. They're in columns. So we have cell 1, cell 2, and cell 3. So each individual cell can be seen independently. That allows me to check one cell against the other. So should one cell start to deviate, I can actually check it by monitoring which 2 cells seem correct to me. Doesn't really do anything else. The HUD is designed to be as simple as possible and only tell you PO2. You can't change the set point, you can't edit any of the functions of the rebreather, you can't get it automatically to do anything. It just monitors the rebreather, and it's a completely separate system to the system over here. So this controller side of our rebreather that controls the partial pressure of oxygen, that adds oxygen via the solenoid, this is all done through the controller, whereas the electronic HUD got its own battery, its own board, everything's completely separate. The only thing that it uses are the same cells. So we've got 2, let's say, independent monitoring systems. Generally, the controller will be running, it'll be adding oxygen, I'll be able to dive very, very kind of autonomously and easily. If this was to fail, so maybe the controller was to get cut, the battery was to die, something similar, I could then switch to the HUD. I would still have full understanding of what I'm breathing, what's inside the rebreather, but I would need to switch to manually adding oxygen to the rebreather to maintain my PO2. So HUD and handset, 2 independent devices to allow us to monitor our rebreather. This also allows us to control our rebreather, and this does not. So we need to verify the battery levels are sufficient. We need to make sure that our 9-volt batteries are greater than 6.6 volts. So we turn that on. We'll have a look. To do this, I'm going to use the display button on the right hand side of the shear water to go through the displays, and I can see that my external battery voltage is 8.8. So I'm going to write down there 8.8, that's good. And I need to check the internal battery and the shear water again. So on the same page, I can see the internal battery, and that's 3.39. 3.39. So I've checked now the battery for the handset itself, and I've checked the two 9-volt batteries that are in here that run the solenoid. Okay, there's two batteries in here, and they work together. They're not a battery 1 and a battery 2 where it uses one and then the other. They use both batteries together at the same time, so both batteries will degrade, and it will give me 1 voltage output. I need to make sure that they're functioning and I've got enough for the dive. So they are both got enough voltage in them, 8.8 and 3.39. I haven't been able to check the separate battery for the hood yet. Okay, the hood is a completely separate battery. When I turn the hood on, if the hood starts up and doesn't give me the little battery warning, so there's a code by lighting up the corners for the battery warning and going yellow, if I don't get the hood warning, then I know that my hood's okay to dive. So I'm just going to turn my hood off. Remember, the hood is only some little LEDs, it doesn't need a huge amount of power. So, verify the battery voltage is sufficient. They absolutely are. Now, step 6. Inspect the head O-rings and fit the head to the scrubber. So I'm just going to inspect the head O-rings. If you need to remove these, you can do it. I've just sharpened a paintbrush here. That allows me to get in and remove the O-ring nice and easily. Something like an earbud, just to clean out the groove. Make sure it's nice and clean. If you want some kind of lint free or some blue roll, is my favourite. We get through tons of blue roll here. Just give the groove that it fits in clean. O-ring itself, I want to just clean it off first, and then I'm going to inspect it for any nicks, tears, cracks or breaks, just giving it a little pull as I go to turn it through my hands. Looks like it's in good condition. I'm going to add myself a tiny little bit of silicone grease, so just rub that between my fingers, and then I'm going to put that silicone grease onto that O-ring. The O-ring shouldn't be greasy, only shiny. You're going to do this on a regular basis, so please don't put too much on. Too much grease just means there's plenty of places for dirt and grime to stick. So just shiny O-ring, and then I can put them into place. So this is our CO2 seal. Now we've got our two watertight seals. They're at the top there. Again, just use a little pick to lift those out. One, there's two of those. And these two O-rings, if they need cleaning and greasing, are exactly the same size, so you don't need to worry. Generally, when I take an O-ring out, I take them out one at a time, clean it, replace it, clean it, replace it. Last thing you want to do is end up with a pile of O-rings on the desk, no idea where they came from. So we do it bit by bit. So somebody's just asked, is it safe to rely on batteries when you're underwater? What would happen if a battery connection failed and went flat while underwater? So, depending on what happened, which one failed, so if my battery in my controller failed, inside the handset itself, the machine would automatically default to a low set point. So it would manually keep my oxygen up enough to keep me alive. It wouldn't be as high as I'd like, so I'd like to manually bring it up, and I could tell what that would be using my hood. If my hood was to die, it wouldn't be much of a problem at all, because I would still have my handset and my machine would still be running completely normally. So having both systems fail underwater wouldn't be ideal, and that's why we carry our bailout. So if both systems failed completely and we lost two batteries at exactly the same time, we would need to switch to our bailout, okay, and go off the rebreather. However, if only one of the batteries failed, then absolutely we can continue to dive with the rebreather and continue to make our ascent while getting out of there. So yeah, we absolutely can. So how does the nerd connect instead of the hood? If you follow my handset and you follow my hood connector, they're both connected to the head using subcon connectors. So these are a subcon connector that's here, and there's a subcon connector that's here. These are two wet connectors. There's two Torx screws on each one. If you remove the two Torx screws, you can just unplug that cable. You can then replace it with a shear water nerd, you can replace it with another controller, or if you damaged your hood or your handset, you can just replace those. Interesting to note, on the shear water you can add a nerd. Nerd stands for near eye display, I believe, redundant display or something. So basically it's a little version of this screen that's actually head up. So rather than having just the lights, you can actually have all of the information head up. You can only put that really on the hood side, because the nerd for the JJ is not a controller. For some of the rebreathers, the nerd can work as a controller, but in this rebreather, the nerd can't. The nerd must be a backup monitoring system only, which means you're paying about quite a lot of money, like 1,800 quid, to do exactly the same thing that this does. The nice thing about this is the Smithers code, eventually you don't see it anymore. So while it's in its normal state, your body's very good at blocking out these 3 green flashes. So there's just 3 green flashes happening in the corner of your eye and you don't notice them. Eventually, you're diving around, maybe something goes wrong and one of the cells starts to deviate. So you'll get 3 green flashes on 2 of the cells, and one might flash 5 times, or it might flash red. And your body will pick that up immediately, so it stands out. So generally, this having sitting in front of your face, you don't notice it. Whereas something like a nerd is quite a bit bigger, so could get in your way. My normal preference is to stay with the machine in its standard guise as much as possible. So I'm going to remove any debris or dirt that's inside these 2 O-ring grooves. They're quite clean today. You will notice when you clean an O-ring groove on a rebreather that you get kind of black. The black comes from the O-ring itself, so don't think that your machine's getting really, really dirty. Although this machine did not too long ago go in a really dirty cave, a dirty mine in Wales. Next step, I'm going to clean the O-ring, make sure the O-ring's nice and clean. 1 and 2. Okay, that's nice and clean. A little bit of grease on my fingers again. Pop the first one in place. Takes a bit of practice dealing with O-rings with greasy fingers, but eventually you can get it quite easy. Just put the second one, grease the second O-ring now, making sure we're not getting nicks or tears, and pop the second O-ring into place. Just got caught there. Second O-ring falls into place. So I've got my 2 sealing face O-rings that stop water entering the rebreather, and I've got my CO2 sealing face O-ring here. What next I need to do is attach the scrubber, which would be full of softener lime, with the mixing chamber to the head. To do that, I put both facing each other, I rotate them in the wrong direction, and then eventually I turn them clockwise so that they screw together. They screw together and become one part now. So I've got my head attached to my scrubber tube, okay, with the base plate on the bottom there. So all of that now is one unit. I just have a quick look around, make sure the O-ring isn't pinched. It's really unlikely because of the groove it sits in, but just check and make sure that those are screwed together. I actually get a small friction fit here as well, so not just the O-ring, I get a small friction fit that kind of keeps everything nice and neat. Okay, we can tick off inspect the head O-ring and fit to the scrubber canister. Next step, install the scrubber canister into the housing, aligning the button with the hole. Depress the button until it clicks. So I'm going to move a few things so you guys can see. Bring the rebreather back over. Okay. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to fit the rebreather so that this peg, so our little push button on the back, aligns with this hole here. To do that, I just need to make sure my solenoid feed is out of the way, make sure all of my hoses are out of the way, and place it in. As you can see, we're supplied with quite a nice handle on the back of the head. That means we don't need to pick it up by any of the cables. I'm going to put it down and I'll just align it nice and gently. When I'm happy that this is over, the hole, I can just gently press the button and it will fall down into place, and it's aligned inside like that. When I'm ready, I'm going to put a little bit of weight on the top of here. It's going to push down and you're going to hear a click as the button drops into that hole and then pops back out again. So there's our click. And we can see that our button's fitted securely into place. This means that our spring on the base is compressed now, forcing the softener line together, keeping everything nice and tight. The head O-rings are now sealed against the can, so there's going to be no water entry through the top, and it's all one single unit. So the back of the unit is now assembled. Okay, of course, make sure I tick it off on my checklist. Step number 8, connect the rear breathing hoses to the T-piece and ADV. Let's have a quick tidy up. And I'll spin the unit round for you. So these are the rear breathing hoses, and I'm going to connect them to the T-piece on this side and the ADV on this side. Just while I'm doing that, I'm going to inspect the inside. I've got 2 O-rings inside each hose. I'm just going to take a look inside, make sure that those are nice and clean and they're well lubricated. Yep, so 2 O-rings there, clean, and well, just a little bit of hair on that one. So I'm just going to lift that hair out. Clearly that's not mine, it's probably Will's. Will needs a haircut at the moment, I don't know if you noticed. Okay, super. Lift my handle up, and I'm going to put these through the handle. So that hose is going to come through the handle, and that hose is also going to come through the handle. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take my T-piece, hold it in the right place, and each of these threads is slightly different. So this is a left-hand thread and that's a right-hand thread, and that means that I can't mix my hoses up. I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to start by screwing gently. Now, this is Delrin and this is Delrin, so they're really, really tough fittings, but you need to make sure that you're not trapping that O-ring and making that O-ring kind of come out of its groove. So just go nice and gently to start with. So just 2 fingers, and eventually you'll feel it get a little bit tighter. And that's when the 2 O-rings hit where they're going to sit. So once it's there, just go a little bit harder, just then we're back to 2 fingers again, and it should go all the way in. I'm not tightening this with my hand. Remember, this is on an O-ring, so it doesn't really matter if this is ever so slightly loose. It's just so it can't pull out again. So I'm just going to take it and leave it on the stop. If I over tighten it, going in the water, heating and cooling the rebreather means that that's going to get tighter and tighter. And when I come to get it off, I won't be able to get it off. So just make sure it's on the stop. The same thing on this side. Bring it up and see this thread's the opposite hand. Bring it in, tighten it, goes tight, give it a little bit of power, and then it should just be finger tight again. And there we go, all the way to the end. So that's our rear breathing hoses fitted to the ADV and the T-piece. Okay, the next step is, while holding the solenoid away from the eyes, hold the solenoid hose away from the eyes, briefly open and close the oxygen valve to blow any debris from the oxygen fitting. So this is our solenoid hose. It comes and feeds pure oxygen into the top of the electronic head. The electronic head, I don't know if you can see, fitting right here. This fitting inside has a small mesh that stops any particles entering. But inside the solenoid is a very, very small orifice that allows the gas to flow. If that was to get blocked, I could potentially be in a situation where my machine isn't adding oxygen, or it could block the valve in the open position, which means oxygen's flowing when I don't want it to. So really I want to try and keep that in tip-top condition. The solenoid, because it's magnetic, means that it's going to have some iron in it, and then obviously adding any water to that isn't ideal either, because it means that we're going to have a small issue with rust. So I'm going to try and blow any moisture out this hose. I'm going to just point it away from my eyes, just briefly open the oxygen valve slowly. There, any gas or any moisture that was in there, any rubbish that was in that hose is now blown away. Quickly look in the top of the solenoid fitting and make sure that's clean as well. That step's done. Step 10, connect the solenoid hose to head fitting finger tight. So again, now I'm going to put the solenoid hose through the handle, lift it into place, and then just finger tight connect the thread. When you're assembling this rebreather, you should need almost no tools. If you need tools to assemble the rebreather, then it's a service centre item really. It should always be just your hands, a little bit of grease, maybe an O-ring pick as the absolute maximum to assemble this rebreather. It means it can be done anywhere, anytime. Okay, so that's now fitted. Okay, our next step. Verify the correct operation of the non-return valves in the mouthpiece. So, this is our loop. The rebreather. Okay, so this is our rebreather loop. This is what we actually breathe from, so it's the mouthpiece if you want to call it, and actually its real name is a DSV, so dive surface valve. It has a mouthpiece on the top, and it has a central Delrin section with two flexible hoses on each end, a connector at each end that's handed, so I can't get it on the wrong way around. So two Delrin connectors at each end, and two hose weights. So these are heavy hose weights, and these help to stop the loop from floating up above my head and kind of pulling it out of my mouth. So I've got hose weights on there as well. On the front of the rebreather loop, I've got a little switch. If I move that switch into the down position, that means that there is no gas flow to me. Okay, I've closed the mouthpiece off. If I bring it up into the up position, that means that it's now open and gas can flow from the rebreather into me and back out through me. On the top, this small fitting here, this holds the hood in front of my eyes. So, first thing I'm going to do is just inspect it, make sure there's no damage, that it's all in good condition. I'm going to have a quick smell, just make sure it's nice and clean. Put my finger inside, I can have a little wipe test to just make sure that my finger comes out clean. This part gets quite dirty. When you're diving with this, all of the kind of spit and moisture from your mouth is going to leak out into the mouthpiece and through this hose, through this XL hose. XL hose is labelled with some red O-rings actually, so you can tell that it's, let's say, contaminated air or dirty air that needs cleaning on the red side there. So that's going to sit in our mouth. As you do, that spit and stuff's going to collect in these convolutions, and if you don't disinfect and clean it properly, quite easily bacteria will grow inside this nice, dark, warm environment. So we make sure that we disinfect these properly to just check, because the machine's been in storage a little bit, we just give it a little smell, and it should smell like plastic or disinfectant. If it does, great. So, to check the operation, I need to make sure that the gas moves as per the gas path. So if you look on the top, you'll notice I've got an arrow. It shows me the direction of the gas flow. So the gas should flow from this side through the mouthpiece to this side, okay? And that's because it's directional. I need the gas to pass around the rebreather in the right direction. So the oxygen's added on the inhale cycle, and then it goes through the scrubber on the bottom, through the bottom of the scrubber on the exhale cycle into the cells in that direction. So I need to make sure it works. In here, there are two mushroom valves, and those two mushroom valves open when you inhale, this one, and then when you exhale, this one will shut, and this one will open to allow the gas to flow. So the gas is now directional, and it will flow from the left to the right in this rebreather. I need to check that that works. To do it, I put it into CCR mode, so I lift the little lever up, so it's pointing out directly towards you guys. I'm going to put it in my mouth, and then I'm going to cover one side. Okay? If I cover the left-hand side, okay, this is my inhale side, right? So it means that I shouldn't be able to inhale. While I try and inhale, I'm going to listen to this side. And I'm going to listen and see if I can hear any inhale noises, you know, like small squeaking as gas passes. So, cover the mouth, put the mouthpiece in. So I can exhale, which is what I expect, and I cannot inhale, so that's perfect. And now the repeat for the other mushroom valve. This time, I'm going to put this side tight against my cheek so no gas can escape, and I'm going to listen carefully to this side. Again, I'm not blocking it, I'm just listening to make sure now that I can inhale but not exhale. Okay, so that works. I'm not trying excessively hard. I'm not trying to blow really, really hard and shut these closed. I'm not trying to suck really, really hard and suck them open. Okay, so in and out. I've already told her, Will, and you're meant to be doing a garden, otherwise you should have been doing this video. So, just check that that works again. Super, so that works. Try to get in the habit, whenever you take this out of your mouth, we make sure that we close the loop. Closing the loop will mean that no kind of dirty contaminants, scorpions, all that kind of stuff can enter our rebreather. So just make sure it's closed. While it's here, it's a good idea, just check the mouthpiece, make sure the cable tie is tight. Really important part of the rebreather is make sure water can't enter it through this cable tie. Okay, part of that, step 11, was to connect it to the T-piece in the ADV. I'm going to bring it around so you guys can see it. So I'm going to bring the loop round. Just check the O-rings on either end. No hairs, nice and greased properly, nice and clean. And then I'm going to bring it into place. So I start by screwing it on slightly, and then I start and screw this one on slightly as well. Once they're basically in place, I can then adjust the position of my mouthpiece, and I want it so it's pointing directly up. That means that when I'm actually in the water like that, the mouthpiece is going to be the right orientation. If I start with it not pointing directly up, it'll be slightly out of orientation in my mouth. I might feel a bit uncomfortable. So I get that into place, and then again, same thing. Sorry about that. Just connect this one up. Make sure the orientation's right, and then we go. Tighten. Eventually, you'll feel it get a little bit tighter. We just continue, and it should go all the way to the stopper. There is a quick check coming a little bit later to make sure that none of these O-rings are damaged or been moved out of place, but just to be on the safe side, just try and feel that they go in nice and smooth as we go. Again, right against the stop. Once we've fitted those, we can tick it off. Route the head-up display and the handset into the right position. So my controller, I'm going to take it past that now through the handle, and make sure that where I wear it, which is on my left arm, it's in the right place. The hood, I have it that comes through this cover here to make it protected. It's going to go through this red O-ring, and then, because it's kind of a bit long, just going to wrap it over once, put it through the second one, and then I can take a look and I'll say, look, I've still got a little bit of slack, so I can take it over again. 2 wraps in there. I want to bring it and click it into my hood holder like that. And that means now, when the loop is in my mouth, I can see quite clearly the hood on the top there. Just turn that off. So, make sure, look, my hood is nice and well protected. It starts on the inside there, because that's sitting on my shoulder. I don't want it to get damaged or caught on anything as we swim through it. And I can tick off the next step. Step 13 is to complete a positive and a negative test. So, positive and negative tests are ways that we test the integrity of the loop. One is to evacuate and breathe in all the air from the rebreather and make it negative inside. Making it negative inside will check for any leaks through the pressure of air being pulled in through any holes or any broken O-rings or any hair kind of stuff sitting through O-rings. So we're going to do a negative test now, okay? So to do that, I'm going to lift up the mouthpiece. I'm going to put the mouthpiece into my mouth, open it, and then I'm going to inhale and exhale through my nose. Inhale through my mouth, exhale through my nose, evacuating all the air from the rebreather. I'm going to suck it until all of the air is out. You'll notice that these loop hoses that are sitting almost touching the bench will be quite a bit shorter when we're finished. So, put it into place. And then I close it to keep that vacuum in there. And you can see now the difference in the distance that the loop's been sucked in. I can check and make sure that my ADV diaphragm is now sucked in. And I'm going to leave this test for at least 1 minute. Okay, I want to make sure that the integrity of my machine is good. So at least 1 minute is a good start. And I want to make sure that the canton bags are still collapsed. Make sure that my ADV diaphragm is still in, and make sure that that loop that we've managed to compress up stays compressed up. If at any point the loop was to start to sag, or I could hear air rushing in, or I could see that the ADV diaphragm had returned to its normal position, I would know that I've got a leak somewhere. I'd need to then start to check the rebreather to see where it is. The best check you can do actually is to do a positive test, which is the following test, to see if you can find the leak quicker that way. If not, it means starting to break the rebreather down into parts and figuring out which part is leaking. So we've got at least a minute now, and we can say that our negative test is pretty well passed. We've got a good distance still here, still tight. I can see actually the tightness inside the convolutions of the hose, and I can see my ADV diaphragm still in there. When I open the loop, you'll hear a rush of air as air rushes back into the rebreather and all of the parts go back. Good. So that's quite a nice negative test. Again, try to get in the habit. When it's not in your mouth, we can close the loop again. So that was our negative test. Okay. If you imagine we've got a lot of O-rings that sit inside grooves, we've sucked them all in now, haven't we? So everything's compressed. The counter-lung bags themselves have been stuck against each other. So we've now done a negative, so check that those parts aren't leaking. But if there was a hole in this counter-lung bag and it was sucked against the next one, it might not necessarily show a leak. Also, the O-ring grooves that now they were sat in, they've all been pulled together, they are now under negative tension. We know they don't leak, but let's test them under positive tension where we push everything out to its extreme. To do that, I'm going to add air to the rebreather. To do that, I'm going to inhale through my nose and exhale through my mouth. So the opposite way. Inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, blowing the rebreather up. If I keep blowing and keep blowing and keep blowing, the overpressurization valve down here on the counter lung will pop. This is designed to make sure that if I was to ascend without exhaling through my nose, that the rebreather doesn't damage my lungs. So it's set quite light. I can't just blow and blow and blow and blow this thing up and really put it under a lot of pressure. I need to make sure that my overpressurization valve is there as well. So I'm going to check that it works at the same time. I'll inhale through my nose, exhale through my mouth, and you'll see the machine actually blow itself up. These counter-lung bags will get bigger and the whole machine will stand up. So lift it up, take a little bit of weight off, and then so you can hear on my full exhale there, the counter-lung just blowing off. And if I turn the machine to the side, you'll probably see that these bags now, there's quite a lot of tension in them. This is my exhale counter-lung, and this is my inhale counter-lung. Quite a lot of tension in there. If there was to be a leak in the rebreather, so you'll see what would happen if I put a slight leak in the rebreather. You can see the machine starts to sag and fall down. And that would indicate to me that I've got a leak somewhere. So we'll go ahead and we'll just do that again. Close the loop, make sure everything's working. And I want to leave this for a minute. So this is our 1 minute positive test. So we've blown the rebreather up now. Feel that tension. Look, make sure there isn't anything sagging. Listen, your ears are a really good part of this. Try and do this in a place that's a little bit quieter. If you can hear a leak, it's very easy then to kind of move your head around and identify where that leak's coming from. We're quite lucky actually, there's no leaks in this rebreather, which is surprising for me. Usually my rebreather takes quite a bit of a beating. But no leaks, which is good. It shows the strength and integrity of this machine. When I'm happy that that's passed, I'll then open the loop, the machine will settle back down again, and I can just remember to close, make sure nothing enters the rebreather. Right, complete a positive negative test for at least 1 minute, and we've done that. The next step is to open both cylinder valves. So I'm going to open my diluent and open my oxygen. To do that, I want to make sure that my SPGs are covered out of the way, same as you do with any other rebreather, any other piece of equipment. So I'm going to turn on the diluent nice and slowly. Allow the system to pressurise. Once it's open, I can open the valve a little bit faster. Just check my manometer's working, it is. Same thing on the oxygen side. Now, the new rules about oxygen are that we should open them as slow as possible, up to kind of 2 minutes to open our oxygen. As the oxygen expands through the pipework and expands through the first stage, there's been a little bit of a few risks of fire in the past. So we want to make sure that we reduce that as much as possible, stop this heating as the gas expands and causes frictional heating as it moves through the parts. Nice and slowly as much as you can. So what I'm going to do, cover the SPG again. Okay, and here I'm going to bring the oxygen valve to where the gas is about to flow. And at that point, really start to move slowly. I can actually hear now a small hissing of the oxygen as it goes in. A little bit further, and then we wait. Okay, I can see the needles move to 10 bar. Let it slowly sit there. A little bit more on the valve. My needles move to now 50 bar. Let it come up a little bit slower again. We're now at 110 bar. A little bit slower, a little bit, there we go, 160 bar. Keep going. Okay, great. And now we're at a full pressure 200 bar. You can open the valve. Okay, got a couple of questions. Let's answer a few of your questions. In fact, before I do that, make sure I tick that checklist off, don't get caught out. Okay, a couple of questions. Can the council overpressure value setting be changed? Not really. So the spring is set by the manufacturer. It's a very, very light spring. As long as you don't take it apart and change it for another spring, pull and kind of damage on that spring, then it's really unlikely. Usually with springs over time, they get softer, not harder. So it's going to get easier and easier and easier. When it goes in for its annual service, hopefully the service centre will notice that it's not told the normal amount of pressure and change it for you. There is the chance that you could fit the overpressurization valve from the wing to the counterlong because they're the same size, but that's why we recommend only ever taking one thing off at a time and then putting it together. Okay, so that's your answer, Q. Sam, silly shortcuts that you see in divers taken with this specific unit. So some of the shortcuts people don't usually check are things like making sure that the O-rings are well greased and clean and not damaged. They'll put it together and then they'll have a lot of problems saying, well, I've got a small leak from somewhere, and realise that half the dog is caught in one of the hoses. That's not ideal. Other silly practices, not filling the scrubber at all. You know, I can also put my hand up and say that in the past I've done that by mistake. Not packing the scrubber correctly, rushing while you pack the scrubber, that's a bad idea. Not analysing your gases is a really big thing that people do. People assume, when I took it to my dive centre, they filled it with oxygen, it's got oxygen in it. So analysis of gas, marking the gases again is a really bad one. Realising that, you know, you had your cylinder with 1070 in it last week and today it's got oxygen air in it, but you're going to do a 100 metre dive. Those kind of things are really, really important to go through. But generally the machine's quite bulletproof. If you go through the checking procedure, which we're starting now with the positive and negatives and the calibration, all that kind of stuff, if it passes all of that, it means that most of the rebreather is assembled. The one thing that can catch you out though is this scrubber. It's very difficult on the surface to know if the scrubber's working properly or not within a small period of time. So the scrubber itself, you need to make sure that you've done a good job of packing it, filling it, and making sure that you've got time remaining on it if it's a pre-used one. Okay. Is this done at before every dive or just at the start of every day? So this is our pre-build sequence. So we've got two parts to our checklist, Sean. This is our build sequence. And then on this part of the checklist we have our pre-dive sequence. So pre-dive you will do this check, of which there are 12 steps. When you want to strip your rebreather at night and then eventually build it the following day, you're going to follow this checklist, which is 27. Now, I took apart the counterlong harness wing regulators. You wouldn't normally do that, okay? I did that just to show you. You can take, let's say, 20 minutes off, just for the sake that we've disassembled the entire rebreather. You wouldn't normally do that. When you've got it at home, you just take your cylinders off, take your head and electronics out, take the front of the loop off, and then that's it. So it would be a much smoother process during the build-up if you were to do this for yourself. Well, I think that's all the questions for now. The next step, I've just opened the cylinder valves. I'm going to close all the cylinder valves. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something called a high pressure leak check. So make sure my valves are fully open and then close them completely. The idea of this test is to see what pressure is in the system, and then about a minute later to see if the same pressure remains. Because the cylinder valves are off, I've only got the pressure I've got in the system. If there was to be a leak on any of the hoses, any of the pressurized hoses, then I would notice a pressure drop over time. Okay, so I'm just going to put those there. You can, if you want, remember the number, so like 180 and 210, I could remember that if I wanted to. But the best way to do it is when I turn the cylinder valves back on again, is look to see if the needle jumps back up again. There might be a small kind of tiny jump, you see that with a slight temperature change over time, but generally you shouldn't see too much of a difference. Okay, so a couple of more questions we've got here. Do you have to disinfect and antibacterial the loop? Yeah. So the front of the loop, the counter lungs want disinfecting after every series of diving. So if you're doing 2 dives and you're out on the boat for the day, there's no disinfectant at night, that's not the end of the world, you just wash it with fresh water. But at the end of that, say that weekend, you bring your machine home, you disinfect your counter lungs and let them dry fully so that they're ready to go again. The checklist we're using, so this checklist is produced by the agency, so this is SSI, Scuba Schools International, JJ checklist, but it's based on and approved by the manufacturer. Now, the thing with checklists, checklists are a really important part of what we do to make sure that we do the machine process properly. I've got numerous stories we can tell you about people that have had serious incidents or even died by not using a checklist. However, using a checklist badly or having a checklist that doesn't make sense to you is equally as bad as not using one at all. So what I suggest to my students is that they use this checklist and start to get familiar with it, but if they need to make notes of the checklist on top so that they understand it. If you don't understand it or there's a point that you think, well, that's not valid to me, you'll skip it. And if you start to skip points of the checklist, then you'll skip other parts. Okay, so the actual philosophy behind checklists is quite a detailed one. Gareth Locke does quite a lot of this information in his human factors class. So if you want to look at the human factors in diving class, there's a lot more about information about checklists there. However, what I try and train my students to do is from day one, try to follow the checklist and try and understand the checklist and make sure that we discuss each individual point and why it's there. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't have put it in. So we just try and make sure that each point that's in there is important to you and explain that importance to you. And that should hopefully mean that you do it every time. Right. So we've left it about a minute and I'm going to lift the SPGs up and I'm going to turn on the oxygen. Okay, great. That needle didn't move. We still got 210 bar. We started with 210 bar. There's no leaks on my oxygen side. Diluent side. Turn on the diluent side again. Okay, no fluctuation in the diluent needle either. And so that means there's no leak on my diluent side. I put my SPG back into place. Tick off that point of the checklist. Okay, Paul and Linda. You've not used your rebreather since Christmas. I've got 2 hours left on the scrubber. Will it be okay to use after the lockdown? The answer is unfortunately not. So you're going to need to switch that scrubber material out. If the scrubber material has been used, its moisture content can change over a slightly longer period of time. So depending on when we're able to get in the water, I'd suggest just for the cost, you know, we're not talking about a huge amount of money, maybe 14 quid, something like that to change the softener line, that I would go and actually change that softener line. Generally, you can leave a little bit of period of time between partially using the lime and then using it again, but if it's a prolonged period, it makes sense to change it. At the end of the day, the most important thing is to remember that our softener line is keeping us alive. It's removing the CO2 from our body. It's really important. Without that in place and without it working properly, we could end up with serious problems on the rebreather. Very cheap to change, so in my opinion, I'd change it and get it replaced before you go diving again. Hopefully soon. Hopefully we can go diving soon. Right, so that's checked off. Point number 16 is verify the oxygen interstage pressure is between 7 and 7.5 bar. To do that, I'm going to need an interstage pressure gauge. The interstage pressure gauge, turn it on, put it into bar. It's got a low pressure inflator fit in. I'm going to take my oxygen manual addition valve, and then I'm going to plug them together. And this, as you can see, is 7.6 bar. Disconnect. So I'm going to write on there 7.6 bar, which is slightly high. Okay, so it's on the higher side. 7 to 7.5 is what we're looking for. If the oxygen part in-stage pressure is too high, that means there's too much pressure on the solenoid. The solenoid needs to open against the gas flow. So it means it takes more voltage to open against the gas flow if the gas flow is higher. If the gas flow is too high, there's potential that the solenoid cannot open against the gas flow at all, which means oxygen won't enter the rebreather. So it's a good idea to make sure that that's in tolerance. If it's out of tolerance, on the regulator, there's an Allen key adjustment screw that will be adjusted and the in-stage pressure will be changed. Again, probably better to see your instructor or to get a service centre to do it, but if you're in the field, it's an Allen key, you turn it, you check it, and you make sure that it's back in standard again. So I'm going to take that one off. We're happy with that. Verify the in-stage pressure on the diluent is between 9 and 10 bar. We'll come to the diluent side. Make sure that this one is 9 to 10 bar, and this is 9.3. So 9.3. While I'm here, good idea to try and remember to just put these maps back together again. You're going to need them in the water, so I'll put those both back together again, like that. And that was 9.3. What I'm doing by writing all of these values down is I can track them over time. I keep these checklists, I just take a photo, upload them to Dropbox, and it means that over time I've got values that I can see changing as my battery's dying. I can kind of work out how long it's dying over. If I see that my in-stage pressure is drifting slowly over time, again I can think about roughly when it's going to need me to take it into the service centre and get it checked out. Okay. Next step is to verify that the manual addition valves and the ADV are functioning correctly. To do that, I'm going to take hold of the oxygen manual addition valve. I'm going to press it. I'm going to press it all the way, make sure that it doesn't stick in. That works. Then I'm going to check the diluent side. Press it all the way, make sure that it doesn't stick in, make sure that it's free. So I've checked the oxygen and the diluent manual addition valves. The next step is to check the ADV. I'm going to press the ADV diaphragm. Okay, it's not working, and that's because the shutoff is in the shut position. Move the shutoff to the open position, check that it works, close it, check again, it definitely shuts it off, open it, check that it opens. Okay, so I've made sure that the manual addition valves are both oxygen and diluent, and the ADV are both functioning. Okay, 2 questions again. Further question about old softener lime. The JJ is a sealed unit, right? So no different to sealed tub of softener lime. Assuming you've not breathed the scrubber, can you preload it with a scrubber material? Yes. So as long as the machine is kept clean and stored well, the same as you need to store the softener lime, there's no difference between storing the lime in the machine and storing the lime in the tub that it comes in. So you can pre-build this on, let's say, a Friday, and if you dive in on the Sunday, take it down and dive it on the Sunday. So it doesn't need to be filled at the time you want to use it at all. The difference is when the line's pre-used. When the line's pre-used, you're adding moisture content. So it makes sense to then strip the rebreather and stop making sure the cells and everything are out of that moisture. Then what do you do with the scrubber? You've got to keep the scrubber moisture the same. The chemical reaction is based on the amount of moisture that's in there to allow that reaction to work properly. So if we change the moisture content by either drying it out too much or making it too wet, we can change the way that the softener lime works. So we want to try and keep that as close as possible. And like I said, the best way is if you're unsure, just change it. You know, we're not talking about a huge amount of money when you look at the value of the rebreather itself or even the value of your own life. So if any time you think, should I change the softener lime? Yeah, why not? Throw it away, change it. Another question from Mike. What's the availability of cells from JJ like at the moment? I know they're in massive demand for ventilators. So Jan's not made any indications to when they will be available yet. I believe we can still get them. Jan's not told us that there's any parts that we can't get. We're still getting deliveries from JJ. We also have a bunch in stock. So I think we've got something like 20 cells in stock, 5 of which are slightly older dated, but we do a discount on those to get those out to you. And then the newer cells, yeah, we've got those in stock as well. We have contacted medical suppliers to see if they want our cells. We've also contacted many NHS hospitals to see if they want the softener line we're holding, and currently it's not required. So if you guys are looking for that stuff, looking for softener line or looking for cells, we have them in stock and they're ready to go. Right, the next step is to verify the wing and inflator valves are functioning. So take my wing and inflate it, make sure that it holds pressure. It does. Make sure my deflator works, the inflator's not running on. Find my dump, make sure my dump valve works. Next step is to verify the dive surface valve is functioning correctly. So I come around, I just make sure that the DSV is moving forward and backwards. There's no grinding in there. Sometimes you get sand and stuff stuck in here. So we just make sure that it feels nice and smooth, nice and easy to operate. Everything's clear and clean. One final check on the mouthpiece. Now I've done all my checks, make sure that it's in good condition, and then close that mouthpiece. Now I want to verify the overpressure valve on the lung is working. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to come to the side, turn the counter lung over. You can see now my lung overpressure valve. I've got this really quite long hot string on it. Give it a pull, make sure, and if you look through the hole, you can actually see that it's moving backwards and forwards and then seating into place. We already checked for our positive check that it seals, so we just need to make sure that it's able to open if we want it to. One of the skills that I do while I'm underwater, if I want to reduce the amount of oxygen in the rebreather, I can do something called a diluent, or bring up the oxygen in the rebreather. I can do a diluent flush, and that's to add diluent while releasing the gas that's in the rebreather. To do that, I will pull on this. So I want to make sure that this is accessible. To do that, I'll make sure it's routed through that little bit of bungee we talked about on the wing, and in that way it will fall forward like this position, which will mean it's sitting on my right hip when I come to do the skills. So it's exactly where I need it. Verify the overpressure valve is functioning and is fed through the loop in the wing. Yes. Step 22 is to turn on the controller and hood and verify their operation. So I turn on the controller, 2 buttons. Turn on the hood, 1 button on the end. I'm going to watch my hood as it starts up, make sure all the lights work, and make sure that there's a slight, this looks like a T. So all the bottom lights light up and the lights up the middle, and it should be pointing up. And that way I know that my hood is correctly orientated. You can hear actually the solenoid start to fire and start to inject gas now. So my handset is on and my hood is on. So to verify the functionality, so I'm going to check that both buttons on my shear water work and go through the menus. Yeah, and I can go through all of the information screens. That all works nicely. Time and date set right, and what I'm looking for here is any characters that are missed or anything like that. If I've got a missed character, that could be potentially quite dangerous later on, so I'll just check. Right. Next step, turn the controller on the hood, verify the correct operation. Now we're going to start the calibration process. So step 23 is to open the mouthpiece and make sure that it's in the closed circuit position. So I'm going to open the mouthpiece. What I'm doing here is I'm opening the mouthpiece to allow the loop to be ambient pressure. What I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to ask the machine to inject oxygen. It's going to inject a lot of pure oxygen onto those cells to calibrate them. And calibration means that we tell the machine that this is pure oxygen. From pure oxygen, it makes a line and says that, okay, so if this is 100%, this is what 88% should look like. This is what 130% or PO2 1.3 should look like. So it draws a linear graph from that. To do that, we need to calibrate the machine and tell it what oxygen is. If the loop was closed, the oxygen inside would keep being added and the pressure would build. Now, those of you that know basic physics in diving, if I've got a fraction of gas at an increased pressure, that means the partial pressure is increased. So if I was to calibrate with pure oxygen with the loop closed and the pressure built up, the machine would see more than pure oxygen. Okay, it would see more than 100%. Okay, more than a PO2 of 1. We've got 100%, so 1 times by our current atmospheric pressure, So our ambient pressure now is 1, atmospheric pressure is 1. So 1 times 1 is PO2 of 1. If I was to close it, the PO2 was to, let's say, build to 2. Yeah, that means it would see 1 times 2. So it'd see a PO2 of 2 rather than a PO2 of 1. So it would be out of calibration. So I need to make sure that that mouthpiece is open to allow the gas to flow out while I do my calibration. Bring the machine a bit closer so you guys can see. The table's going to wobble a bit. If you live with that. Right. So I'm going to calibrate the handset and I'm going to calibrate the hood. Hopefully it's not going to flicker too much. I'm going to do this roughly the same time. I've got my hood here, which I'll take off so you can see. And you can see that currently the hood is flashing yellow and green together. Okay, yellow and green together means it's a PO2 of 1 according to the hood. The handset has a PO2 of 0.71, 0.71, 0.71. So the posh pressure according to the handset is 0.71. The posh pressure according to the hood is 1. So we've got a bit of an issue, haven't we? There's a bit of a calibration difference between the two. And that shows that these two devices are not connected at all. This is a completely independent device to this and needs to be calibrated separately, the handset from the hood. To do the calibration, I'll show you just the handset first. I'm going to move into the menu screens and I'm going to go to my calibrate screen. When I'm happy that calibration is what I want to do, I'm going to press the right hand button. You can see at the top, these are the millivolt readings of the cells. So these are actually what the cell is reading, because the cell doesn't read PO2 itself. The cell reads oxygen, and the amount of oxygen that's in the cell creates a millivolt, and that millivolt reading is shown up here. Okay, you can see at the bottom that millivolt reading equates to that PO2. Okay, and I'm asking me, the calibration gas you're going to use is 100%, so you're going to calibrate for 1 bar, which we are. So I'm going to press yes, I'd like to calibrate. The machine will start to calibrate. You can hear it injecting oxygen, and you'll see these millivolt readings start to rise, and you'll see these PO2 values start to rise. As they're heading up, more and more oxygen is being added to the screen. Yeah, everything's going to be mirrored, unfortunately. You're going to have to live with that. Okay, so it then added pure oxygen, and it told me that those 3 cell values equal a PO2 of 1. And if I press confirm now, you can see that the PO2s are all at 1.01. That's because there's a slight atmospheric difference at the moment. The image is mirrored because I'm using the front-facing camera, so I can also see your comments. That's why it's mirrored, unfortunately. I don't know if there is a way to flip it. Let's have a look. Live video. No. If I flip, you're going to get the back camera. You're going to have to live with it. So, you can see that I've calibrated my cells. The hood now is showing 1, 2 flashes of green. That means the hood's at 1.2. So the hood is out of calibration. To do that, I'm going to need to bring the handset back to oxygen and make sure that then I calibrate my hood. My hood, if I press the button on the end, it'll flash red and yellow on 1 light, that means menu 1. Press it again, it'll flash red and yellow, that means menu 2. Press it again, flash red and yellow, that means menu 3. Menu 1 is to turn the hood off. So if I long press while it's on menu 1, it will turn the hood off. Menu 2 is calibrate. If I long press while it's on menu 2, it will calibrate. If I long press on menu 3, it'll take it into the settings where I can change it into colorblind mode, I can change it into the opposite orientation mode, and I can change a few of the little small features. But generally, we don't tend to use menu 3. It comes out the box ready to go. So menu 1, menu 2, menu 3. So I'm going to make sure that the machine is back up to pure oxygen again. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to redo my calibration. Machine's injecting oxygen, the PO2 is coming up. I can hear the machine injecting. I'm going to move my handset, my hood, sorry, into menu 2. So I've got yellow and red flashing in the middle. As soon as I hear the solenoid stop and the machine's up to pure oxygen, I'm going to press and hold my hood, and all the lights will light up and it'll flash. And that'll tell me that it's calibrated, and you should see yellow and green flashing together. I'll close the mouthpiece to keep the oxygen in there, and now I can confirm my hood against my handset. So PO2 of 1, 1, 1. So cell 1, cell 2 and cell 3 all read 1. Yellow and green flashing together on my hood means 1. So cell 1, 2 and 3 all yellow and green. So this is one, and this is one. Okay, Simon, there is a way to calibrate at altitude. I told you during your course, you need to plug the handset into the hood side, calibrate the hood board using the handset, and then switch it back. And that way, it'll calibrate the hood at altitude. The handset itself it's got an altitude, it's got a pressure sensor in it, so it can calibrate itself for altitude automatically. The hood doesn't have a pressure sensor in it, so it calibrates automatically to 1 atmosphere. So if you want to use the hood, the best way to calibrate it is to put the handset into the hood plug, calibrate the hood board, and then switch them back again. All right. Other option, another controller in the hood side or a nerd in the hood side, and that way you won't need to worry about calibrating altitude. Just make sure that I tick off my calibrate part, and because I've disassembled it for you guys, I want to put the hood back into place as well. Right. Step 25 is to pre-breathe the rebreather. A pre-breathe is where we sit down, we put the unit in our mouth, we pinch our nose, and we breathe from the unit for 3 to 5 minutes. The reason to do this is quite a controversial one. We're testing the rebreather works, is what we're doing, but what are we checking for? Now, we check that the oxygen addition is working. Okay, so is the machine functioning? When I exhale and start to breathe, does the Po2 in the rebreather drop? And then inject oxygen again, and then I see the Po2, the partial pressure, rise up again. Okay, and that's what I'm looking for. Am I looking to see if there is CO2 problems with the scrubber? Now, if you're sat still, not generating a lot of CO2 in a very, very high oxygen environment, and you're breathing very, very gently, the likelihood is that you're not going to build up enough CO2 in the rebreather to give a really noticeable effect. So you know that the scrubber's not working or broken. So there were some tests done by Simon Mitchell, and he said it's kind of inconclusive as to whether the people can detect the scrubber in a length of time, because the length of time could be varying from 5 minutes to 20 minutes, depends how long you want to do. So best bet is to pre-breathe the rebreather anyway, monitor for signs of hypercapnia, so that's build up of CO2, you're looking for things like a headache, perceptual narrowing, increased breathing rate. If that occurs, great, you've picked it up on the surface, but we should be monitoring that for the first part of our dive anyway, in case our scrubber's badly packed. You'll notice that pretty much straight away during the dive. And all throughout the dive, you want to be checking yourself and making sure that your breathing rate isn't up. So we're going to be checking that on a constant basis. So our pre-brief's really there to make sure the machine's functioning properly and make sure that everything's working. So that's why we do our pre-brief. We'll breathe the machine for 2 to 3 minutes and make sure it's working. I can't do that today because, as you know, we didn't fill the scrubber at all with CO2. So we'll breathe the machine, make sure our handset values rise up and down, making sure our hood values rise up and down, and make sure our hood and handset rise up and down together. Step 26, verify the Po2 on the handset and the hood are the same. So after our pre-breathe, make sure that they're both aligned again. So 0.97, 0.97, 0.97, and on our hood, still Po2 of 1. Got slightly rounded, and that's perfect, they both work. We tick that off. And then that's our build complete. Step 27, our final step, is to switch off the cylinders, turn off our handset and our hood so that we don't waste the batteries. Turn off the handset, turn off our hood. Okay, and now the rebreather is ready to go. I can go and get into my dry suit, get myself prepared, make sure that I'm ready to go diving. When I'm ready to go diving though, I need to go through my pre-breathe, pre-dive sequence. And this is again to just check everything's functioning. Because my rebreather was built up yesterday or was built up an hour ago, doesn't mean that when I'm ready to get in the water, nothing's changed. People like rebreathers, and from time to time they'll come over, have a look while you're not there, fiddle with it. change things for you, which is quite unfortunate. So it's a good idea to make sure you do this pre-jump kind of just before you get in the water with the machine on your back to verify the machine's functioning properly and everything's working. So that's our pre-dive sequence. We also have a post-dive sequence to what we do when we strip the rebreather. So we take the rebreather apart between dives or between series of dives. Put the handset out. As you can see, the JJ itself is really, really unique in terms of its simplicity. Super, super simple, very, very easy to maintain. We've built the rebreather up in not very long at all now. What kind of time are we on? In like an hour and 45 minutes, we spoke about the entire rebreather, built it right up, stripped it right, you know, and to make sure that it's working. When you're versed with this pretty well, you can build the rebreather up in under 20 minutes. The guys, there's a couple of guys on that you can see on the Facebook Live at the moment, Simon and Gordon. They came with me to Egypt to do their class. They started 2-3 hours to build their rebreather. By the end of the class, 25 to 30 minutes. So it doesn't take a lot amount of time, but you do need that practice because there's steps you definitely don't want to miss. You know, every single step is as important as each other. Some of the features, let's say, we've got this robust aluminium housing. You can fit any size tanks you want. So these are 3 litre steel tanks it comes with. If you buy the CE version, you can put aluminium tanks on here if you need less lead. If you can't get them, you can put 7s on here, that kind of stuff. It's all integrated, so the handle and the frame is all one piece. It's kind of all set together. It's got redundant electronics, so our hood side and our controller side are completely separate. Those have got separate batteries, and so they have 2 ways to monitor the oxygen side of the rebreather. The ADV is built into the rebreather in the T-piece, so again, it's not an additional part, it comes with the machine. DSV, not a BOV, so dive surface valve to go between closed circuit and open circuit, no BOV, keeps it simple as possible. It's got the manual addition valves, so you can manually run the rebreather should the electronic systems fail. Again, this is all standard stuff. You can plug in off-board gas by rotating those MAV valves over. We have 3 oxygen sensors and it uses voting logic, so on the base there's 3 oxygen sensors that you could see there. One of the nice features about the JJ is the oxygen sensor comes with the cable connected, so that when you change the oxygen sensor, you change the cable. Okay. On some rebreathers, the cable is part of the electronics, and so if the cable was to get snagged, damaged or cut because it's quite loose in there, or if it was to start to degrade the connector, then you're stuck with it until you send the electronics off to be repaired or replaced. Every time that you change the cell inside the JJ, you change the cable as well, so it's a really kind of unique feature and good about the rebreather. Full Trimix compatible, CE certified to 100 meters. So that's as deep as we get CE certification for rebreathers, means that you can take this rebreather and do kind of really deep dives with it. Scrubber time, this is our standard scrubber. This is the normal axial scrubber. So axial means that gas passes through the bottom, up through the scrubber into the mixing chamber. This scrubber has a duration CE of 3 hours, so 3 hours maximum and 3 hours minimum dive time. So no matter what you want to do, you get 3 hours out of it. You can split that over 2 dives, or you can do it in a single dive, it's up to you. I don't recommend doing deep dives on a partially used scrubber though. We can also get this one. This is the XRC. So this is the extended range can. If I put it next to this can, you'll notice that the base is much smaller, even though the cans are roughly the same size. And that's because this is a much bigger scrubber. Okay? This holds a lot more softener line. And this one has a radial scrubber. So in this scrubber, the gas comes down the outside in the same way, but it passes from the sides in all places to the central tube. And then it comes up through the central tube into the mixing chamber. So slightly different to pack, slightly harder to pack, but gives a much bigger surface area. Because you've got a much bigger surface area, you'll get a slightly longer duration. So this is you've got a longer duration because of its design, and a longer duration because of the amount of line that's in there. This fit holds a lot more line. Designed for expedition style diving, should do really, really big dives on this. So it's a hell of a piece of equipment. Not CE certified though, so if you decide to upgrade and change to this, that's up to you, but it won't be used for training, and it can't be used, let's say, under CE rules. So we tend to dive with the standard machine, and we have these things for our personal diving. You can get a radial scrubber for the standard can, So you don't need to buy a new can, you can actually get a radial scrubber, so get a slightly longer duration. So we have the standard duration can with an axial. If you then put a radial in it, you'll get slightly longer duration. If you move up to the bigger XRC can, the XRC can only comes with a radial, and that will give you really, really long lifetimes. Okay, so axial, radial, and an XRC can all available. So there, I'll get that away. Super reliable. Service intervals are really, really good on this machine. So we've got obviously first stages on this, so they're the same as anything annually serviced. But every 2 years you want to get your machine serviced, and every 5 years as a significant major service. So once you've bought the machine, it's quite maintenance free, to be honest with you. As long as you are building it up, checking the O-rings, making sure that it's clean, it's not much more difficult than any other piece of equipment to maintain. Right. The JJ, price-wise, they are €7,190. That's ex-VAT, whichever country you want to buy it in, and that's excluding delivery. So in the UK, it turns out they're currently around about 8 and a little bit grand. But it comes like this. This is it. With the cylinders, with the valves, with the controller, with everything ready to go. You need to add gas, because we can't ship it with gas, and you need to add softener line, and then you can dive it straight out the box. There's really only one form available, and this is it. You're looking at it. JJ-CCR CE version dive can. Dive can stands for the CAN bus system. Some of the older ones are the analog JJs. This is now a digital dive can. It means that the electronics talk to themselves digitally rather than via separate wires. Makes it a little bit easier because we can change the handset and stuff like that. The dive can CE version, there's no options. You can't have a bigger wing, you can't have a different colour, you can't have a whatever. It comes like this, ready to go out the box, and as it is, it's really, really capable. So the only things people do is they can modify it slightly. You know, I've got some slightly different D-rings on here. I've got some halcyon webbing because the other webbing wore through. That's about it. I've changed the position of the SPGs, and I've added some quick release cam bands rather than the standard cam bands. But that's it. You know, all the diving that I do, all the you know, the deep diving we do, the amount of diving that we do, we don't need to really edit this rebreather at all. It comes out of the box pretty much ready to go with the wing and everything on. So you just put it on your back, fill it full of gas, fill it full of lime, and you can dive. Training, different options for training, depending on what your prerequisite is. If you have a decompression certification already, we can take you straight onto a decompression course on the rebreather. Can be up to 45 meters and with trimix as your entry level course, as long as you've got the right prerequisite. Or if you've not got any technical diving experience at all, we can still take you straight to the rebreather, but you'll be limited in the depth that you can go to 30 meters and using air as a diluent, while you gain some experience and learn about the deco theory, and then we can build up. Training comes in between 800 and £1,000. So with the unit, you're looking close to 9 grand, and that's the full package. So you get a full package of training and a machine. Now, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. But the JJ resale market is super good. If you buy a 2015 JJ, now you're going to be paying close to £6.5 grand anyway. So the difference between what you've lost over those 4 or 5 years is only a couple of grand. So per day's diving, it's quite cheap. Obviously, there is the initial outlay, but there are a lot of benefits to diving with the rebreather. You're constantly on the best mix, so you get the longest dive times possible. It's warm, moist breath, which keeps your hydration level from dropping so much. It keeps you a little bit warmer. Obviously, it's completely silent, so you can get to the fish. Makes your decompression more efficient. You use less gas, so it's cheaper for trimix. And you know, there's a whole community built around it, just like the rest of diving. We offer tri-dives on these rebreathers. You'll see throughout the course of the next few weeks as I do the different rebreathers, the differences between the two. If you want to come and see them up close, we recommend coming to do a tri-dive day. Tri-dive day is £100, and you can pick any 2 rebreathers that you want to dive. So you can maybe dive with the SF2 and the JJ, or the Inspiration and the SF2, or whatever. And when you've tried the one that you like, we can spend a bit more time detailing the options for purchase or detailing the options for rental. Rental units are also available to get you guys in the water on them. There is a lot of discussion about, you know, which rebreather is best for me. Should I pick this one over that one? And the answer is, you don't see many people unhappy with the rebreather they've chosen. And that's because most of the rebreathers do a pretty good job. They're all designed by good companies that do really nice rebreathers. Now, there are some uniquenesses that mean the rebreather fits your style of diving a little bit more than it fits the other person's style of diving. But I wouldn't say that, you know, there's one rebreather that stands head and shoulders above the rest. They're all really, really good. And once you've chosen your rebreather and you've got a good course and you enjoy diving it, you'll probably find that you'll defend the rebreather till the end. You know, it's like calling somebody's wife ugly. Once you've chosen and spent 8,000 quid on a rebreather, that's it, it's yours, and you want to protect its reputation. So this is the JJ we spoke about today. I will answer some questions now, and then when we come on again for our next Facebook Live, we'll cover one of the other rebreathers and we'll build and strip that, and you can see the differences. So if you've got any questions, just type them in the comments box and I'll go through them. What have we got? Mark, sorry. No, we've not done the AP yet. The AP is just sat over there. We're going to build the AP up. I think it's going to be, the next rebreather is going to be the Scuba Force SF2. I'm trying to remember the dates and times, but I don't know. I'll post them in the comments afterwards. We're going to do the SF2 next. Then we're going to do the AP. I've got an Evolution Plus here, so it'll be the Evolution Plus we'll go through. Then we're going to do the Revo. Then we're going to do the Poseidon. So we'll start with SF2 next. Any other questions? How long were the radial standard and the radial XRC? Honestly, don't remember. Let me take a look, see if we can find it in our information. The C duration of the XRC is dive can. Don't think, no. I think the honest answer is the CE testing wasn't done in the same way on the can because they didn't want to sell it as a CE product. CE testing is quite expensive, but I know there's been some super long dives, more than double the normal duration and even double that again. So it really is a hell of a can. If you're going to do really big deep diving, it makes sense, but there are some negatives to having a radial scrubber. You get slightly less dwell time and they're slightly more difficult to pack, but there is a much bigger surface area, so there is a benefit as well. So some swings and roundabouts with those actually. Oh, wireless transmitters recommended, not included. So you absolutely can put wireless transmitters on it if you like. The shear water that's attached to the rebreather though isn't an AI, so it's not a Perdix AI, so they won't connect to this. If we were to use an off-board computer that was a shear water AI, you could no problem at all connect to that with wireless transmitters. One of the things we've found though is with a few of our students that dive with transmitters, finding a place where the signal stays right is a bit of an issue. And it's not that losing the signal is a problem. You know, you've got gas, you knew you had gas a minute ago, you've still got gas now. It hasn't magically disappeared unless you're hearing a lot of bubbles. But when you want it, you know, you want to be able to find that information, so it's quite annoying. And it starts flashing at you, which gives you a little bit of insecurity. So find a place where the transmitters work. The nice thing about the transmitters, which I actually like, is if you put them on really short hoses, you reduce the amount of gas that's in the high pressure system. So if you shut the gases down, it means that the gas amount volume that's inside the hoses is less. That means that if you had too much oxygen in the rebreather and you turn the oxygen off, that gas going in, that oxygen that's remaining in the system to fill it up would be much less. So transmitters would be a really nice option. But what I've seen with the two or three students that we've had use them so far is they need to put them on quite long hoses, so they sit up here near the cylinder valve, somewhere near your right arm shoulder, so that they can get the right connection. Underneath the back, unfortunately, there's a bit too much metal and stuff going off, so it doesn't seem to hit such a good signal. In which case, kind of defeats the object, adds a little bit of complexity that really I don't think you need. I think had Jan been given his way, well, I saw his first rebreather he made, it didn't have SPGs on at all. Because if your gases are full, and you know it's full, you've got 3 litre cylinder filled to 200 bar, that means you've got 600 litres. It's around about 600 minutes of oxygen, give or take. Let's say we knock a bit off for 50 bar off and whatever, we've still got 400 minutes, 500 minutes of oxygen on board. So as long as we're not hearing any leaks and our machine's functioning properly, then we shouldn't have any issues at all with the amount of gas that we've got. Diluent you don't really need. During the descent you need diluent, but you should have an off-board supply you can also plug in. So the amount of gas on board, with a high pressure hose, with all of the crimps, the hose itself, all the O-rings at either end, the swivel pin, the face, the ball-bend tube, there's a lot of failure points in an SPG. So I think the only reason they're on there is because they're required from the CE point of view. They also help with the boom drill. So yeah, you can put transmitters on if you want. Do you check the cell millivolt linearity? So I check the cell millivolt linearity to make sure that they come up, and I write them on my form when I do my calibration, and then I check them over days. But the check I do is actually in the water for linearity. So when we enter the water, I want to spike the PO2 up, so I want to bring the PO2 up above 1, because when we calibrate, we can only calibrate to 1 atmosphere. If we want to check that the machine can read more than 1 atmosphere, we need to do that at pressure. So when I go down during my descent, I'll spike the PO2 up and check that all the cells move up linearly at the same time. Any more questions? Looking forward to seeing the SF2. Are these posting videos as a link? Yes, so Facebook Live stay on the Dive Master Scuba page, and they'll stay there for the next kind of, I don't know, I think they stay there forever actually. So you can share those, you can come back and watch them if you want, that's not a problem at all. Any more questions? No. Chaz, yeah. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see anything else, if there's a rebreather that we don't have, let us know. Either Dave Gratian or Kieran Hatton or somebody like that we know can bring one of those in, or maybe do it from their place. Well, they can't come in, can they? But maybe they can do that from their place. We can get that uploaded as well. So if there's something else you want to see, just let us know. The next rebreather video, don't remember, I was supposed to have written that down and bring it with me. I'll put it in the comments. Might be nice actually. I see Mr. Sanderson's on there, James Sanderson Badger's on there, or maybe John Kendall can do the JJ in its GUE guise. So not available at all through JJ, but available through GUE instructors and through Halcyon is the GUE version of the JJ, which is designed for slightly deeper diving and really designed to help the GUE guys continue their philosophy that they use an open circuit onto Rebreather. Got bigger tanks on it, manifolded diluent tanks, and an oxygen on the back. So maybe I can get James from his house to do a video, post it on our Facebook about the GUE config. If you guys want to see that, put a comment in the box, and we can go get James to run through the basics of his Rebreather and the differences between that standard JJ that you're looking at now and the GUE one. So thank you guys. Enjoyed speaking to you all. Enjoyed the comments, and if you want to see anything else, like I say, hit us up in the comments box, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you very much.